Certainly a full house of important people this evening. Thanks for joining us. Please be seated. And we'd like to start the new year in a good way, and I hope everyone's had an opportunity to look at the new First Nations art as we recognize our friends and neighbors in the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam First Nations. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Cassidy.
Oh, those are the agenda. Thank you, found it. Recommend that the January 13th, 2025 regular council meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
Thank you. Councillor Lambert. Seconded. Call the question. All in favor? Contrary carried. And we welcome a young gentleman here this evening who's going to talk to us about the West Vancouver Youth Council. And I'm sorry, sir, normally the council chamber would be much fuller today. So your great oratory skills are going to be limited to us and those who might be watching on TV or the internet.
I hope I put on a good show for everyone that is here.
There you go. You are the start of the new year, sir.
Good. Well, I'll start the new year talking about something that we all think about, and that's the future around the new year. So
thank you.
Talk a little bit about that. Am I ready to?
Yes, please.
Begin? Okay. Well.
And we do ask everybody to introduce themselves.
Yes, that will be the beginning of my speech. So
Thank
Mayor
you.
Sager and members of council, for those I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet, my name is James Knight. I'm a grade 12 student at Collingwood School, and I'm a proud third-generation resident of West Vancouver. Over my 17 years in this community, and especially in recent ones, I've seen West Vancouver grow at a pace far faster than what my parents and grandparents experienced. Yet at its heart, West Vancouver remains an intergenerational community, one that is shaped by and passed on from generation to generation. There's a common life cycle here. Young West Vancouverites often leave after high school, returning only when they're ready to start their families of their own. This reality underscores the importance of forward-thinking decision-making by incorporating regular input from young people. Projects like regional transit or the Cypress Park development, which are years in the making, will define the future my peers and I inherit. And that's why the policies and consultations of today carry extraordinary weight for the young people of this community who will be the adult residents of tomorrow. Inspired by a speech Mayor Sager gave at Collingwood during the 2022 mayoral elections, I began advocating for the establishment of an elected youth council to advise on issues affecting the future of West Vancouver. Over the past several months, I've worked closely with Councillor Thompson to engage key stakeholders, including members of the school board, administrators from Collingwood and Mulgrave, students across the municipality, and representatives from the legislative and youth services teams. These conversations have consistently showed strong support for a formal, structured platform for youth to provide meaningful input to council. Excuse me. Initially, I envisioned a council modeled off of systems in New Westminster, Spruce Grove, Alberta, and Halifax, where student bodies from the schools within the municipality elect representatives to provide input. However, after extensive consultation with stakeholders, I now advocate for a phased approach. The Youth Council would begin as an appointed committee of council, established through the same processes as other council committees. Over time, the council could transition to an elected model, with representatives chosen by students from each high school proportionate to their size. This phased model balances immediate feasibility with long-term aspirations, ensuring the initiative is realistic and sustainable while still providing room for future growth. Some stakeholders in discussions have asked how this council would differ from the existing Youth Advisory Council, or YAC. I have great respect for the YAC's work, which focuses on improving the lives of today's youth through initiatives like leadership workshops and inclusion programs. However, the Youth Council I advocate for would address a different and complementary need, offering consistent, long-term policy input. A 2023 policy brief from the United Nations Special Envoy on Youth highlights the importance of formalized, structured systems for youth engagement in policy making. It warns against relying on ad hoc input, which can be inconsistent and often unrepresentative of youth as a whole. While the YAC provides valuable insight when called upon, it does not operate within a formalized framework like a committee of council. A youth council, on the other hand, would ensure regular, representative, and integrated contributions to the decision-making process. A youth council would do more than just shape policy. It could cultivate strong democratic habits in young people, As a formal committee of council, it would follow the same procedures as other committees of council, offering members firsthand experience in municipal governance. Transitioning to an elected model would further empower students, teaching them campaign, to vote, to represent their peers, and engage actively in civic life. This is particularly important at the municipal level, where voter turnout in British Columbia is traditionally the lowest among the 3 levels of government. Over the past years, youth-driven initiatives like Vote 16 have come before the council. While commendable, I do believe a youth council offers unique advantages. First, a youth council provides a dedicated platform for young people to ideate and contribute to policy as a distinct constituency. In contrast, Vote 16 focuses on lowering the voting age, which raises concerns about extending voting rights to individuals who might not yet contribute to municipal taxes or businesses in the district. A youth council ensures that youth voices are heard in a way that is impactful and contextually appropriate. That's key to this. Second, the youth council is far more feasible. Unlike Vote 16, which requires legislative changes beyond council's control, a youth council can be implemented entirely within the framework of the current municipal government. Moreover, similar models have already been successfully adopted in the Lower Mainland, Western Canada, and the East Coast, as I mentioned. This gives West Vancouver an opportunity not only to implement proven concept, but also to lead the region and even the nation in youth engagement and policy making. Over the past 9 months, I've been deeply committed to this initiative. While I had hoped to participate in its initial stages, my upcoming high school graduation in a few months means that this is unlikely. However, my commitment to this idea remains unwavering. It is my hope that future generations of West Vancouver youth will have a formal role in shaping the community they will one day lead and call home. By supporting this initiative, this council has an opportunity to ensure that the decisions made today reflect not just the present, but also the future. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Knight, that was a brilliant presentation, sir.
Appreciate that. Thank
Brilliant
you.
presentation. I think we could have quite a lot of discussion around this. We have this agenda looks tight. We have another agenda for our in-camera that makes it difficult to spend a lot of time, but Councillor Gambioli?
So just a couple questions. First of all, I should disclose that Mr. Knight is my next door neighbor. Welcome and good to see you here. So we have, I'm assuming that this idea would extend to the high schools, right? High school level. So arguably there are 7 high schools, as far as I know, in West Vancouver. So you're talking about moving slowly over towards having representatives from each high school, right? But for the time being, you're talking about it being an appointed group. And so would this only extend to people of high school age? Because it says youth council, but you know, it's all relative here in West Van. Sort of anyone under 40 is still considered a youth around here. So what was your thinking in terms of the actual age of people on this council?
Yes, Councillor, thank you for your question. First, yes, I'll clarify this would be for high school students, and the high schools that I've engaged with include Collingwood, Mulgrave, Rockridge, West Van Secondary, and Sentinel. I know the West Vancouver School District extends to Bowen Island and other regions, and so there was discussion about including them, but I want this to be a District of West Vancouver initiative rather than a school board. And yes, it would be available to high school age students. I believe this is the right age to engage. As I mentioned in my speech, I think many students leave after high school. And so I think this is the best age to capture them while they're active residents and participants in the community before moving on and eventually returning later in life.
Very interesting. Councillor Lambert, please. No. Sorry, Councillor Watt.
Yeah. Pleasure to see you again, Mr. Knight. I just really wanted to comment at how well you always are put together, and I had the pleasure of working somewhat alongside Mr. Knight on a campaign recently, and you're beyond impressive, and I'm just curious, what are your future plans?
Thank you, Councillor. I plan to attend university next year, still deciding where. I'm fortunate to have offers from amazing institutions both within Canada, the United States, and Europe. So we will see.
Excellent. Well, I suspect we'll see more of you in the future. That's really all I had to say. Excellent speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Well, we'll follow up. May I have a motion, Councillor Thompson, please?
Yeah, I'd love to put this motion on the table. I'll do that, in fact. I'll recommend that the delegation from the West Vancouver Youth Council regarding West Van Youth Council be received for information with thanks. And I'd like to make some comments, too, about Mr. Knight and your dedication to this.
Can I just propose a friendly amendment? I think that it should be the delegation from Mr. James.
Mr.
I think
James
his
Knight.
name should be in
I
the
agree.
records. Thank you.
Yes, can we make, and second that? Okay.
Thank you. And that moved and seconded.
Yeah, and I'll say that, and I just really respect and appreciate your commitment to this. It seems like a lot longer than 9 months, but if you say so. I respect that you're trying to create an environment for the youth to go through a true demographic process and the elevation, the foils of what a true election can bring to light, which I think is good. And I know yourself, you've gotten involved in working in elections, and that's a really great way to understand what goes on in politics. We actually just met with MP Patrick Weiler, met his whole team from Ottawa to BC and Sunshine Coast. And we met his intern, I believe his name was Jesse. And their internship was 6 months working for one party, and then they go and work for the other party for 6 months, which I think is a tremendous way, again, to understand the party system. So, I wish you luck in this endeavor, whether you'll be able to participate or not. I think it has some merit, and I hope it is a trigger for a way for youth to get inspired to get more involved and more educated with the whole process and the issues. So thank you so much for all this effort.
And I'll call a question. I would just like to say it was Mayor Peter Jones who invited me to sit on a committee at council when I was 16 years old. Dangerous.
Look at you now.
I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary carried. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Knight. Item number 4, extending temporary outdoor patio area program. Councillor Watt.
Presentation coming? No? Okay. So I would like to recommend that to provide flexibility for businesses transitioning from temporary to longer-term patios and to support the local economy, the district's temporary outdoor business area TOBA program be extended until December 31st, 2025 for businesses with 2023-2024 TOBA declarations.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Snyder. Councillor Thompson.
I have a question, and perhaps could be an amendment. I'm wondering if we should put, instead of extending it for just 1 year, extend it for 5 and go. And I say this because it seems to be working. I think of Horseshoe Bay, which is just about to go under some big development and be quite disruptive to their commercial community. If there's a reason that it has to be 1 year at a time, or if we could possibly consider a 3 or 5 year period.
That's up to members of council, and we have a mover and seconder, right?
I would agree that I wasn't content with the 1 year extension, so I'd certainly be open for longer.
Why don't we make it a 2-year extension at this time? And
3. Can we go for 3?
well, that's up to council. So,
well, is there any reason why problems you consider around 3 or?
okay, let's just hear other members of council. Councillor Gambioli.
Well, so I guess my question would be to staff, why the recommendation for 1 year? And what I note is that what we're trying to do is allow for these businesses to go from a temporary situation to a permanent situation. And in the meantime, they're not charged for anything. We don't charge anything for this whole process. So that would be my concern, is that we would be extending it and we would incur some costs and we would be getting nothing in return for a longer period of time.
Through the mayor, that's the logic, is to be able to continue to review on a yearly basis and that there is no charge. And then it gives you the flexibility to increase the charge if people did move to a longer term solution. So it's council's purview, but that's the rationale for it.
Thank you. Councillor Snyder.
My comment, just in regards to, I recall there was some information attached, I believe, with the agenda here that provided a little bit more of a history. And my understanding is that the only reason that this is for a temporary is because we weren't able to meet sort of the deadlines on agreeing to a permanent one at this stage. Is that not correct?
Yeah, and through the mayor, I mean, individuals can come forward to have permanent facilities, and there would be licensing associated with that. And this was also just to keep the provincial liquor licensing ended at the end of 2024. So the idea was that it would expire then. But if folks still want to have tables and chairs out for a year and with no fee, we thought that was reasonable. Of course, if you'd like to extend it for longer, that's that's open to you as well.
Okay. I mean, I could see 2 years, but I think that beyond that we're sort of opening ourselves up to potentially losing what could be revenue that the district has. So I would be reluctant to go any more than 2 years.
Do you want to make a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to make a friendly amendment.
Okay, the seconder
So
would
until
be in agreement for 2 years then?
you are the
were
seconder. Yes, you are. So till December 31st, 2026.
Okay, that's now moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Contrary, the motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor Watt.
Staff work with the Ambleside and Dundrave Business Improvement Association, Horseshoe Bay Business Association, and local business community to share information and support businesses in shifting from temporary to long-term patios.
Question, discussion, question. All in favor? Contrary, carried. Thank you, Councillor Watt.
Yeah, and finally, I'd like to recommend that the fees and changes, bylaw number 53. Oh,
Charges.
that's right. Sorry?
You said changes, fees and charges.
Charges. Bylaw number 5334, 2024, amendment bylaw number 5372, 2025, be read a first, second, and third time.
Good. Seconded by Councillor Snyder. Discussion, question. All in favor? Contrary, carried. Thank you. We'll move to item number 5, and I'll ask Councillor Lambert, who is the acting mayor, to replace me at this time, as I am a property owner in the affected area at 15th and Marine Drive. Thank you, Councillor Lambert.
We'll do that. Okay, so I believe we have a presentation by Mr. Hawkins. So take it away.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Councillor Lambert, and good evening to all members of Council and members of the public. So it's my pleasure to present you with a progress report and recommended next steps related to the Local Area Plan, or LAP, for Ambleside's commercial areas. So this is a slightly longer presentation than usual, and that's really just reflecting that this project is both a council priority and I think a community priority. So I'll break it into 3 parts. I'll begin by describing what have we done, what have we heard, so the engagement piece. Second part, the draft plan. I'll walk council through that. And then conclude with the recommended next steps. To be clear, I'm not seeking council's endorsement of the draft plan. As you'll see as I go through the process of presenting that, the recommended next steps will be to put it out for public input and workshop it with our local business and resident associations and refer it to the planning committee. So to begin with the engagement process, so this is attached as Appendix A. I'll only summarize it through the PowerPoint. But just to recall, council's direction for this portion of the LAP goes back to July 2023. And really everything we've done has been situated in this engagement lens. So at that time, council directed staff to prepare illustrations so that the public could see, could understand what a potential future of Ambleside's commercial areas could look like. So what that really meant was taking the 5 maps you can see on the bottom of the screen, which were endorsed as the framework July 2023, and turning them into a dozen full-color illustrations so that people could provide their input. The first step of any engagement process is to make sure people are aware. So you'll see the largest circle in grey. We know that 38,000 people were aware of this engagement process. So that's things like postcards, that's visits to the webpage, and so on. The blue circle, 5,000 people we know were informed. So, for example, that would be they didn't just visit the webpage, they actually downloaded the visualization booklet. And then in yellow, about 1,100 people who we directly interacted with. So that's the engagement figure. And that's comprised of the numbers you can see on this slide. So around 100 people who we met with in smaller group sessions, so things like workshops. Close to 600 through larger scale events, things like open houses. And then importantly, around 400 people who completed a survey. And that's what I'll mostly spend my time speaking to in terms of the process. And the intent here was to give council very clear and very transparent feedback. So the questions were structured around the images with 3 potential answers. Do you support? If so, why? What are the reasons? Do you somewhat support? And if so, what are the causes for hesitation, if you like, or what are the suggestions for improvement? And then finally, do you not support? And again, if so, what's the concern? What are the reasons for not supporting? So looking at the survey responses, they all had the same question combined, so that the appendix breaks it down into questions. But the most frequently provided answer was support. So 54% of people across all questions supported the directions. And you can see on the slide there the most frequently cited comments for the reasons for those support. The first, public realm. So this isn't a surprise to me or those that have reviewed previous studies into Ambleside. There's been a long-standing desire for improvements, for opportunities to gather in the village, better pedestrian experience, better connections to move around. The second most frequent, also not a surprise, has been a long-standing interest in really regenerating the village, adding some modernization, increasing vibrancy. The third most frequent reason for support was support for the heights and densities that were illustrated, in including within that some preferences to actually see higher. The fourth most common, also not a surprise, this desire for local liveliness, so to see local businesses thrive, new shops, new services, more interesting places to visit when you're in the village. And then finally, also not a surprise, adding more residential uses within a village, so housing above shops, so single-level living options. The second most common response was somewhat support at 26%. Again, you can see the most frequent comments that people provided. Suggestions for improvement or concerns. So the first, the most common was that concern the heights and densities were perhaps too high. Second, a preference to see more or perhaps even more public realm enhancements. Thirdly, a caution, if you like, that there should be some kind of parking strategy that accompanies any ultimate local area plan. The fourth reason for only somewhat supporting was actually that heights or densities are too low. So you can see there's a range of opinions even on this slide in terms of what the appropriate height or density should be. And finally, a suggestion that the reason for somewhat support was that in fact they want to see more action taken on housing, so greater levels of affordability, more rental housing and so on. And then thirdly, the least commonly provided response, 20% of people do not support. Again, you can see the reasons provided. Heights or densities are too great, concerns around potential traffic congestion, concerns around the potential loss where there wouldn't be, but concerns around parking, so the need for additional parking. Fourthly, a desire for there to be no change at all, so the long-range plan not to essentially exist, for us not to be planning for any change. And finally, concerns around how the proposals relate to the existing or the desired character or context of Ambleside. So just transition to the second part. So how are staff responding? So I think the first bullet point is really a thank you. 1,100 people giving us their time it's a significant contribution. It's always the most enjoyable part of our jobs. So I'd like to thank them. Second bullet. We feel we have a very solid basis from this. Every step of this process has been iterative, more than 1 and 2 in support, 8 out of 10 somewhat support. We feel this is something we can move forward with. And as we do so, and members of the public have also flagged this, there have been many similar initiatives. There's 50, 75 years worth of studies that haven't led to meaningful outcomes. So the things that I've been speaking to, better public realm, more residential opportunities, revitalize local businesses and so on. These things haven't been delivered, so I think there is a strong, broadly shared desire for this to be a plan and not just a study. So we feel, and the second part of the presentation, that engagement findings have allowed us to prepare for you a draft plan, which I want to walk you through. Again, I'm not seeking your endorsement, but I do want to take the chance to walk council and any members of the public that are listening through to describe the kind of where we've got to. I think an overarching point is that a lot of this is confirming elements where we have received feedback on where there are clear levels of support. In saying that, I do recognize that there isn't 100% consensus, nor do I believe that that is realistic to achieve. However, many of the suggestions for improvements we're trying to act on, and where concerns have been raised, we're doing our best to mitigate them. So the draft plan itself, it's divided into 11 sections, so I'll run through them sequentially. So the first is distinct in that it's a slightly separate geography. So you can see in the green border, this is the civic site, so the ice arena, swimming pool, seniors activity centre. The intent here is to really confirm what council has previously directed us to work with through this process. So we understand that the civic site is a hub, so we're looking for synergies. So there are people, for example, that visit the civic site, introducing mixed-use development, shops, services, new housing, we think is a synergy. So, for example, if you're at the Seniors Activity Centre, it would be great if there were also things like medical offices across the street. If you're dropping your kid off for a class in the rec centre, a small grocery store where you could actually, run an errand while your kid's doing a class. And then also, with these supportive land uses, have people live next to these great facilities. And should there be redevelopment, to actually use some of the revenue that development generates to help offset costs of replacing any of the aging facilities, notably the ice arena and seniors activity centre are not particularly recent facilities. So this is what that would look like. The scale would be mid-rise 6 to 8 stories at the intersection, going down to 4 to 5 stories, with a broad range of housing, whether that be rental, seniors, or ownership options. And as I said, we think this is a confirm element. You can see the level of support specific to the question on this area. Close to 60% of people are supportive of what's been illustrated. Moving on to Ambleside itself. Again, begin with a confirm element, and it's not accidental to begin with the public realm. As council will recall, this really has been and is a strong theme of public input and public desire. So we start with the streets and then we plan based on that. So it begins with a public square or plaza network. So in the red, you can see 2 bookend arrival plazas, so the east and west gateways, create a sense of arrival, provide an opportunity to gather. Then within the village, shown in purple, a waterfront gathering space. So this would be on the southern portion of the Fresh Street site, should it redevelop. So create some kind of opportunity to sit there, look at the waterfront views. If you're in the waterfront park, entice people to come upwards into the village. And then in orange, a village gathering space. So this would be on Clyde, dare I say, a more urban experience, and that plays off the quirkiness of that area. And then really connect these places, so make it interesting to move around. People don't necessarily want to explore, but they love to discover. So create those opportunities to look around a corner, see something you'd like to walk down an animated lane, and so on. This is just one of the examples. So this would be the village square. So this is the Clyde Avenue example. Things like temporary farmers markets. This is where there could be food trucks alongside things like craft distilleries, things like that. And again, we think it's a confirm because close to 2/3 of people have indicated support for the public realm system we've been discussing with them. The third part of the draft plan, this is an addition, and I think the key point here is the title. We want to create a great retail street experience. And this is another good example of why we want to, the next steps we'll be recommending, we'll be workshopping this. This is something very much for the Business Improvement Association to weigh in on, but at this point, what we're trying to suggest is there's an opportunity to shape the retail environment. Not all streets are the same. So an obvious example on the screen there, the waterfront. This is where we think we could be trying to encourage and guide things like cafes, restaurants, specialty retail, where people can really come up from the waterfront or look down from the waterfront. A second category might be thought of as the more utilitarian streets, if you like, so the main arterials, principally Marine Drive. And a third category we're suggesting could be more flexible. So this could be as flexible as things like live work, but the secondary streets where there's typically lower commercial rents, often narrow lots, things like local businesses, offices, things that would support the overall economic success of the village, which is not only for businesses, it really is for the residents as well. We want to have people be able to visit their accountant, their lawyer, their doctor, etc., as well as start their own new businesses. The fourth page of the draft plan, this is also an addition, and this is really looking at a broad range of transportation strategies. So the first point, increased parking supply. The grey boundary on the map there is just the commercial village footprint, right? And I think the first thing I want to say is we can increase parking supply. So council will recall some of the concerns raised, or there was an interest in some form of parking strategy. If we have a deficiency of parking today, it's because the buildings are old. Council themselves will be familiar with many buildings that have perhaps 2, 3 parking spots behind the shop or the cafe, often taken up by the employee or the employer or some of the employees. This is just a reflection of the age of the buildings. So if we want to actually increase parking supply, redevelopment is our friend. If those buildings were built today, they would increase the available parking supply based on today's bylaws. So first point, redevelopment is a way to increase parking. In fact, it's your only way to increase parking. You're not going to be building more streets. Within that context in particular, I'm going to highlight 2 sites. What they have, and these are Fresh Street and the Village Square sites. What these sites have in common is they're much larger than the others. You can see the lot lines of various other sites in the village. They're often narrow. These sites are large enough to accommodate things like drive aisles, turning radii for underground parking. So as a condition of redevelopment, and if we enable that redevelopment, we could notably increase the parking supply within the village. A creative consideration, if you like, and again, recognizing this is a long-term plan. The shape in green, numbered 3 there, is council's land. It's currently being used to provide 40 parking spaces adjacent to John Lawson Park. Council could have the option, as those larger sites redevelop and as we require publicly accessible parking on them, to actually expand park space. A big theme has been how do we connect the village to the waterfront? One idea is to actually bring the waterfront experience right up into the village, so you'd have an expanded park space, could be delivered as a condition of development. It would end up sitting directly opposite the waterfront plaza on the south side of Fresh Street. The fourth is more of a confirmation. I think this council has made great progress. I think the policy has been in place since 1971, if my memory is not remiss. There's just one waterfront lot left, so just to communicate that the desire is still there. We think that would be part of the great park system that we're trying to encourage and integrate with. And then the final point, looking at the active transportation side, development creates revenue. This could be improving the Spirit Trail, and recognizing it's a long-term plan, if the council does have an interest in providing on-street cycling bicycle facilities, then we think it would be Bellevue. Marine Drive, it has the buses, it has the trucks. Clyde Ave as an east-west is not actually continuous, so there's the opportunity that we're signposting for directing investments over time along Bellevue Avenue for cyclists. Moving on to the land use components of the draft plan. This is a confirm and a modest refinement. The confirm element is we've heard throughout that there is a desire for the predominant form of development to be low-rise, so 3 to 4 stories. There's a couple of images snipped into the map there. The refinement here is really changing the verb. The framework a year and a half ago was prioritized. We're still prioritizing it, but if we want to make that a priority, then we need to be enabling. And so the enabling things we can do within that form of development is waive cash CAC contributions, consider parking reductions on constrained sites. So that's not everywhere, but if you look at some of the shapes on this map, you'll see they're very, very small. Sometimes they're very irregular shapes. So if we want to see that form of low-rise development, we have to be flexible with parking. And tied to that is actually incentivizing rental residential with a modest 10% bonus increase. This is because renters are less likely to drive. There'll be people who might like to rent and not have a parking space because they want to walk to work, walk to the shops, walk to the waterfront, take advantage of the frequent transit and so on. The second land use element is really focused on supporting a complete community, whether that's from commercial uses, residential uses, or community uses. So there was always a 5 to 6 story land use designation, if you like, in the framework from a year and a half ago. The refinement here is to be very clear that it's 5 stories if it's just regular mixed use, if you like, and that the 6th story would be conditional on either providing office space above street level or if the residential uses are 100% market rental or a mix of strata and below market rental. So we're looking to respond to that feedback that we like the housing. We just want to make sure it's more diverse, more complete, more affordable. The second designation on this map, this is a unique site. It's on the northeast corner of where Clyde Ave meets 14th. It's currently a surface parking lot. Previously, we had suggested up to 8 stories. We've lowered that down to 6, commercial at street level, but again, with a focus on rental housing or a mix of strata and below market rental. Another unique site, if you like, shown in brown, this is the former Masonic lodge site. 6 to 8 stories, that's consistent with what we illustrated. We haven't heard any concerns with that. It's adjacent to the Hollyburn Plaza Tower, which will be to the left on the map or to the west of the site. The only refinement here is to really prioritize the replacement of community use. It is the only CU or community use zoned site in the village. And then finally, this is 3 of the 4 gas stations in the village. I will speak to the 4th, which is at 13th, but for these 3 more central ones, the revision is to lower from 8 stories down to 3 to 4 stories. So that would be consistent with the first map, where really it's in an area where we're prioritizing low-rise development. And the shift in land use direction there would be, we'd simply get less rental housing, or we could get strata housing with that second floor office, and we believe both of those forms would work from a viability perspective. And then a bit of a communication clear up. There is language in the draft plan around managing availability of gas stations. So I want to be clear, we're not suggesting there should be no gas stations. It's just that over time, we want to guide their potential redevelopment. People's electric vehicle uptake could continue to increase. We're already a leader in West Van. It might be that we don't need or want 4 gas stations. This would provide council the tool to guide their redevelopment and also manage the overall supply within the village. Page 7 of the draft plan, this is an addition, and this is, I guess, again, it's in the title. This is really about providing opportunities. I think when we go through these processes with the public, we have interesting conversations. Part of our job is trying to be creative and think differently, recognizing it's a long-term plan. So if you look at the commercial footprint in grey, there are 2 sites which are different from others just because of their location, because of their geography. The first is there is one site it's the only site, it kind of juts out into the apartment area. It's the only commercial site addressed off Duchess Avenue. There's nothing in the plan that said it couldn't be commercial, it could redevelop as mixed use, but we do want to signpost an opportunity that this could be an 8-story rental building. That's very hard to achieve. It's surrounded by apartment buildings of 8, 10, 12 stories. So of that scale, this could be an opportunity to respond to that interest in housing diversity by also allowing a rental or a mixed strata and below market rental building. The second differently located site, if you like, is the green triangle. What's different here is it's the only commercial site which is south of Bellevue. So recognizing the public's interest in even more public realm or even more public benefit, we're suggesting there's an opportunity, or at least provide for the opportunity, to actually transfer the development potential of that triangle site onto Masonic Hall site, should there be a combined rezoning application. So instead of the community use site being provided on Masonic Hall, it could be a taller building there on that site, and the amenity, in fact, would be the district receiving ownership of that green triangle of land, which council could then use for anything it deemed appropriate. So it could be expanded park space again, it could be an arts facility, etc. But it's a different way of achieving community benefit. And again, it's just about providing those different opportunities. Should both of those things be realized, obviously we would end up with a more compact village that itself supports walkability in addition to that great public realm opportunities to gather that I've described. The Section 8 of the draft plan has 4 parts to it, and what they have in common is that these are the real 4 signature placemaking opportunities, so I'll walk through each of them. The Western Gateway, so this is the Hollyburn Plaza site. What you're looking at would be a redevelopment of that. Currently it has a Dairy Queen, etc., and a surface parking lot. As you can see, well supported 55%. So this is really just some minor refinements. So image left, the taller portion of the site, which is already tall, should it redevelop, we're suggesting it orient the massing north-south. That means it's narrower when you look at from upslope, so it mitigates any impacts. Also clean up the massing on 18th Street, so you can see the call out there, just make a more cleaner expression. On the northern side, so that would be Marine Drive, lowering from 6 stories down to 3 to 4 stories, but still delivering that arrival plaza. And then looking north, this time from Bellevue, To be clear, we're not suggesting an increase to the existing zoned permission of up to 180 feet, so no increase to that height, but we're also not downzoning, and confirm that Daylit Creek, so a really unique opportunity to create a connection, but instead of with, for example, an artificial fountain, actually daylighting a creek to create that water feature. The second signature placemaking opportunity, I'm calling it the Waterfront Precinct. Obviously, I'm aware the waterfront extends beyond this single site, but what's shown here is Fresh Street, and I already alluded to the fact that we're looking for underground parking, we're looking for a replacement grocery store, and we're looking for the delivery of a waterfront gathering space to bring people from the waterfront up into the village. You can see roughly 1 and 2 people supported this concept. Some suggested things to confirm and revise. So on the image left there, that is a digital massing of what was just shown as an artist illustration. Moving through the draft planning process, a few things we're recommending could be changed. So to increase setbacks on 17th Street, this is actually the widest right-of-way north-south in the village. It's 100 feet. It has diagonal parking and cherry tree blossoms on one side of the street, have that on both sides of the streets. It would actually increase parking, optimize the available land that council has as a right-of-way. Lower the massing on Marine Drive, so image left, you'll see that's the northern part of the image, that's up to 6 stories. We're suggesting lowering that down to 3 to 4 stories on Marine Drive, consistent with most directions for Marine Drive. And then for the taller portions on the southern half of the site, to be clear, we are suggesting taller, but make those narrower and break them up. So you can see there's much more spacing between the 2 building forms, creates apertures for views, minimizes upslope impact, and generates more value, which taller buildings do, to really deliver that waterfront plaza and enough parking that should council wish to, it could expand the park shown in green on image right. The third signature placemaking opportunity, the Village Square. So again, you can see the image that we took feedback on. Here we're looking north of Marine Drive, so it's not the bottom half of the screen. You can see the levels of support, so still very well supported, at least more than 1 and 2 people. But again, something we think we can refine. So image left is a digital massing of what we took feedback on. Some refinements suggested in image right. So we want to lower the massing on the left building. So you can see on the image left, it's a very broad massing. It's an L-shaped building that would really actually potentially have more impact than if we allow taller buildings. We can increase the spacing between buildings, respond to the location of buildings that are upslope in terms of creating view corridors, orient them north-south, but keep that 2-story street wall, still require the parking underground, still break up the site so there's those pedestrian connections to the Village Square behind. And then the final placemaking opportunity, this one's relatively straightforward. So here we're looking at the 1300 block. You can see Grosvenor behind. Really just one change. We had suggested up to 8 stories. Lower this down to 4 to 5 stories, which does mean we would not secure office or rental, but it still would allow us to deliver the arrival plaza, which is the thing we've heard is most important to folks, 53% of people in support. The ninth section of the plan, this is an addition, and I think what we're trying to respond to here is various comments around character. So this is an archetypal image here. This is not meant to represent any given street. This is what we'd call in design jargon an elevation. So imagine you're standing on one side of the street, you're looking across. What are the kinds of tools we want to use to control development? So varied roof lines. You would have noticed I've spoken in terms of 3 to 4 stories, 5 to 6 stories, etc. We've heard we don't want a tunnel effect, so nothing monolithic about that. Vary the roof lines, create interest. If it's a long block, if we can, break that up with separations between buildings. And then at street level, you'd see things like inset patios, so smaller spaces. In addition to those 4 large public gathering spaces, create things like patios. Divide the buildings up so that the storefronts are not wide, but that they're also varied. Smaller spaces support local businesses. Diversity of rhythm creates interest. And that mix of 1 and 2 story commercial uses, something active at street level, things like offices above. Again, on the character side, so this is what we'd call a street section. So here you'd be looking down the street. To be clear, upper stories will be set back from the primary street. At street level, we'd be looking for generous ceiling heights, so that things like cafes and restaurants are actually places you want to spend time in, That means the businesses have a chance of succeeding. And then in terms of where the building meets the street, wider sidewalks, things like weather protection, landscaping, potentially public art and so on, and maintaining the provision of on-street parking. And then finally, and this slide is all words, but as we go through this process and as we work towards a proposed local area plan, at this draft stage we want to communicate there will be tools to manage how any LAP could be implemented to deliver the outcomes that we've heard matter to people. So building design, a couple of the key things we've heard, respond to the natural environment. That means both the oceanfront and the slope, play to our natural assets. In terms of potential character, people are not looking for anything either too bold based on the questions we've asked them, nor are they looking for something super repetitive. So as any given site might come forward, it should respond to what's around it, but not repeat it. Do something complementary, but a little bit different. Regarding land uses, so for commercial land uses, you've heard me speak a lot about the mix of housing that could go above shops at street level. There's nothing in the draft plan that would limit people's ability to deliver, for example, a wholly commercial project, so office buildings, for example. And should there be any of those harder to achieve uses, so the obvious examples would be a hotel or an arts facility, Council could consider any site-specific variances to the densities and heights we're discussing, but could do so through a preliminary application report. So that's before there's a detailed application. Council could say no, Council could provide conditions, Council could shape that at an early stage on merit if the pros of receiving those kinds of uses in the community are strong enough and Council's comfortable with the proposed form of development. Similarly, for residential uses, we're looking for diversity, so different unit sizes, they suit different demographics. In some instances, I've indicated there would be conditions to achieve height and density to provide rental, but we would certainly consider it anywhere, and to enable that, this is something where we wouldn't be looking for cash amenity contributions. Heritage, there's certainly a lot of older buildings, none of which are registered as official heritage assets, if you like. But again, we'd be open-minded should someone want to make the case for to enter into a heritage revitalization agreement, then Council could consider things like transfer of density. Transportation, we did study this, Council will recall, very early on in the process. We're aware that should the LAP all build out in the next 20, 30 years, it would have a very marginal impact on regional transportation. It would contribute something like 3% to the traffic on the Lionsgate Bridge. I'm not trying to be tone deaf. I recognize it's often a concern for some people in the community. The best way to manage this will be incremental. Every single rezoning would have to provide an impact assessment. People's transportation behaviors may change. We may have older residents no longer driving. We may have younger residents moving in who do not wish to drive or have the same level of car ownership. The way to manage that over time is to manage it over time, requiring each rezoning to provide that information to Council. Parking, I've mentioned we want to increase supply, so that generally means maintaining visitor and commercial bylaw requirements, unless it's those very constrained, narrow, shallow lots. But something Council could consider is actually reducing parking required for residential uses. If the concern is too many cars, provide living options which don't have as much parking. That will obviously lower vehicle use. Public amenities, I've spoken to, a lot of these would be in kind, public realm improvements, potential park acquisition, etc. We also have the opportunity for new facilities, could be an arts facility, and we also have lots of local facilities, things like the library, the ice arena, etc., which would benefit from cash amenity contributions. Second to last, flexibility. This is really about acknowledging that we're working our way towards a long-term plan. Things could change over time. I'd always encourage Council to consider the OCP, the zoning bylaw, as a living document. So should there be any proposals that wish to deviate from a final LAP, Council can consider them on their merit through a preliminary application report. And then monitoring, again, it would be a living document that we're working towards. It could be reviewed every 5 years. We may find after the first 5 years that's nothing has happened, in which case that review would think about being more incentivizing. If people feel it's just right, then it's just right, and so on. So the idea is that we would build in a 5-yearly review mechanism. So in conclusion, moving on to the recommended next steps. To recall where we've got to, what's led us to this so far in the process, there was a big engagement push in spring 2023. That led to council endorsing a framework, those series of maps. We then created the pictures, big engagement push that I've just described last fall. We've got to the stage of what we're proposing as a draft plan. As mentioned, we're not seeking for council's endorsement of this. What we're recommending is that we use it as a tool, as a platform for the next steps. So we would publish this. Community input is always very, very welcome. Never hesitate to get in touch with staff. We always get back to you. Give us a call. If we don't answer, it's just because we're in a meeting. But then we want to roll up our sleeves we have the benefit here of two very well-established and functional groups, the BIA and the Resident Association, have a workshop with them. Also refer this draft plan to the council's planning committee, which that committee has requested, prior to doing more work so that we can fine-tune, improve, revise before preparing a bylaw for council's consideration. So to conclude, staff's recommendations are that council receive the engagement findings for information, that we publish the draft plan for community input, engage those local business and resident groups, refer to the planning committee before reporting back to you in the second quarter of this year with a proposed local area plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins, for a very clear and concise presentation. I have just one question of clarification on the next steps. And you had noted that there would be specific engagement with some of what I might call the primary stakeholders, the ADBIA, and with ADRA. And of course, there's general community input. And could you elaborate a little more on how you anticipate collecting that general community input over the next phase?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lambert. Yes, happy to. So we have a web page which has been the main portal, so that's how people have been getting in touch with us. We know it works. At this point, we've connected with literally hundreds of people over the last year and a half. So we would update the web page based on pending council's decision tonight, obviously. Be very clear, it's an 11-section plan, so we try to keep this relatively short. Put it up there, contact information, invite comments. We log everything. Every single piece of engagement has been transcribed, obviously anonymously. We're not looking to break privacy legislation here. Whatever we hear, you will find out. We will summarize. There could be key themes, etc. But we will continue to hear from the public. And seeing as I'm on camera right now, I'd really encourage folks to get in touch with us.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions from council? I see. I don't know who was first. Councillor Gambioli?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I've got 5 questions, just so that you know. Actually, no, I only have 4 questions. One is just to thank you, Mr. Hawkins, and all of the staff team. I really think this is an excellent synthesis of all the feedback that you've had and the corresponding draft plan. When you come back in spring, it will end up being a public hearing, right?
Through your acting worship. That would be council's determination, but the recommendation that is in front of council tonight is that we do the targeted engagement as well as taking wider comments now, but that we would then present you, seek first reading on a proposed LAP, which then council will be legislatively required to set a public hearing, yes.
Right, okay. So actually, I lied. That was my first question. There are 5 questions. Okay, so just in general, a lot of the parts of the 11 parts propose newly reduced heights. So I just want to know if with all these reduced heights, are we going to meet the target needs of housing and our OCP targets with these reduced heights?
To Councillor Gambioli, yes, staff would consider this an enabling plan, and I think, as mentioned, that's what the community wants us to provide you with. There is a level of skepticism that they've participated in previous initiatives that have been similar. So yes, while it is true that there are some sites where we've lowered heights, we feel that should a version of this, it's just a draft plan and we'll go through the process, but should a version of this be adopted, we think Council will be making significant strides towards providing meaningful opportunities to increase housing within this area.
Okay, so I guess that's a yes. So in the same vein, then I noticed that the planning committee and others would be wondering, especially if we're waiving CACs in some cases, where this low-rise development Section 5 and part of Section 6 are concerned. Is this going to be enough density and height to actually get something going?
To Councillor Gambioli, yes, the planning committee had a very nuanced discussion, and we're seeking Council's direction to refer this to them, of course. So I will find out if that direction is provided. But the planning committee had a range of opinions, but perhaps a fair summary would be that they recognise that a lot of the buildings will be background buildings, if you like. They will be that predominant 3 to 4 story range, and that if we want to see that, we need to be enabling. So as mentioned, not looking for CACs, not looking for second story office, the things that currently restrict those sites, so that this will be the enabling part for that, but to also focus on whether we call them precincts or the 4 signature placemaking opportunities, but to recognize that there will be punctuation points, places which could be catalysts where we can really deliver community benefits, including more housing for the community. So I would like to think that what we're suggesting here is responsive to planning committee feedback, which is not particularly different from that which we heard from the general public. We've also got good support for building on what we proposed through the visualizations.
Okay. And my second to last question is 1763 Bellevue, prioritizing including new community use. So do we actually have evidence that we need community use at this site?
To Councillor Gambioli, so just to be clear for everyone, we're talking about the Masonic, or the former Masonic Hall site. I think I've certainly heard from the public, and there's obviously many conversations, that there is an interest broadly in seeing housing, seeing shops, seeing revitalisation, but for that to be measured alongside what it can deliver for the community. Now, this would be a very long-term vision. I think any version of this which is adopted would be relatively gradual in terms of its growth. But it's hard to achieve community use sites, whether that be new park space, whether that be a new adult daycare, child daycare, arts facility. Different councils of their day could make those decisions. But we do want to accompany any growth, any value generation that council would make when they increase development rights with securing concomitant community benefits. I think an in-kind contribution of community use would be appropriate.
Okay, because I'm just, I'm thinking of, for example, the Park Royal Towers, where we used a lot of CAC funding to create a daycare and a number of units for people with disabilities. And we've actually had a really tough time filling those spaces. So anyway, I throw that out there for, is it comparable, do you think?
To Councillor Gambioli, yeah, it'll be hard for staff to make a comparison, and again, we recognise this is a long-range plan. I guess what we've done right is call this a draft plan. What we perhaps have done wrong is be clear what that means. If we hear through the process that as we move towards what would be bylaw policy, we could build in more flexibility. It could be cash CAC or an in-kind provision such as a community use. We're not at a proposed bylaw level stage, so these kinds of comments are certainly beneficial to staff if council's intent is to build in as much flexibility, if you like, into a long-term document.
Okay. I wonder if maybe Ms. Kettler's department has some feedback on that as well. They would know about, community use needs. I'll leave you guys to talk about that. Okay, my last question is related to the Village Square precinct. So this idea of a plaza on Clyde Avenue, when I looked at it before, my only thought was, in this climate and the way the sun shines here, it would be a very, very dark area, but I see that you've kind of switched the height on there, so it looks a bit better. Why have you suggested that, like, the sort of 10-story building go on the east side of that sort of podium and not the west side, or not a different, I don't know, is that just a complete draft? I would have put it on the west side. I don't know why, but I just thought that would add more light to that plaza area, which I'm still not super convinced about. But anyway, just wonder what your thought is there.
So, to Councillor Gambioli, I do think a plaza is beneficial, and I do think it's not going to be the most well-lit space in the village because it's on Clyde Avenue, which is a complete opposite of the proposal for a plaza on the waterfront side, on the south side of Fresh Street. So I think that is always going to be the nature of it. I think that's the nature of Clyde Avenue today, is that it's, I don't want to say industrial, but it's got its cobblestones. I think it's a different environment, and I think it should remain a different environment. So by public space, think of it in terms of things like temporary programming for farmers markets, flanked with things like craft breweries, craft distilleries, something that's a little bit different, more office use, local architecture firms, whatever it might be. So we're looking to create a different experience as we move through the different primary streets in Ambleside. And then in terms of the locations of the buildings, we've made them narrower and taller, and what we're trying to do is respect the rhythm of existing mid-rise. So if you went further east on Clyde, it's not perhaps well shown in the draft plan, but you'll see Clyde has a series of mid-rise buildings. We will be maintaining the spacing of those buildings, and through narrower forms, we also think we can respond to the northern context by locating buildings that are creating strong view corridors for any existing residents.
Okay.
That's the intent.
I see. Okay, I see that now. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. My first question is around the two gateways. I believe one's Hollyburn and one's Ambleside. I noticed you dropped to 4 stories at the gateway of Ambleside, but you're maintaining the 8-story at the gateway of Hollyburn with a 4-story behind. And I'm just curious about the rationale. Did that come from public input? Is it just a general stab at planning?
Through your worship, acting worship, pardon me, to Councillor Thompson. It very much comes from public input. So start with the 13th Street intersection. So that would be the Eastern Gateway. The only real concern we heard on the 1300 block was the fact that that could be 8 stories. So the compromise there was relatively straightforward. People do want the public square, but they were concerned with an 8-story building opposite Grosvenor, which some members of the community feel is a relatively heavily massed existing building. For Hollyburn Corner, so we're talking opposite the rec centre, or kitty corner to the rec centre. That's nothing we position as a gateway, if that's what your question was about. That's really about responding to the fact that there's high rises all around that site along Bellevue from 10 to 20 stories. We feel that the proposal of 6 to 8 stories is entirely contextual, and some people actually felt was too small given what's around it. We also think, as I mentioned in the presentation, there's very good synergies here. You're at the rec centre, do some shopping, you might want to live near there so you can go to the rec centre, etc. And that was a very well supported proposal through community engagement.
Thank you. My second question around heritage, and having participated in a walking tour during West Coast Modern Week, there's a lot of unexpected heritage buildings in sight. And I'm just wondering if we should spend a little more time really thinking about how we're going to tackle these heritage properties, because as we've seen, quite frankly, someone comes forward to develop and then it becomes a heritage issue. And perhaps this is a question to my fellow councillors. Should we put together a heritage task force or working group to kind of review these sites and qualify the heritage value of them, per se, and then maybe task staff or a type of approach to if one of these sites are going to be developed, what process it goes through. It's it's not something we can decide here, but it is a thought I have would like to pursue.
To Councillor Thompson, I suppose my comment would be, and I've participated in similar walking tours and enjoyed them a lot, but to be clear, we're talking about the village here. We're not talking about the Pink Palace or somewhere. We're not talking about apartment buildings. We're talking about existing commercial stock. Some of the examples that folks in the community who are part of heritage groups have flagged for staff, they're not assets that we're not familiar with, right? So an example would be Hollyburn Plaza. So I call it the Dairy Queen Plaza, but it's surface parking on the north and a tower on the south. Now, I'm aware that we could look at the architectural language of that building and say, it's an example of brutalism. That's what it is. But I don't think I would feel... I don't think I'd be acting in good faith if I were to tell council I think it's a brilliant example of it. It's not the Mac Blow building, which was designed by Arthur Erickson at Georgia and Thurlow. The landscaping there was designed by Cornelia Oberlander. The landscaping in the Hollyburn Plaza building is a surface parking lot and a skirt that wraps around a generally above grade parking. So I think the ultimate question is not, is a building old? Can we identify it and trace it to an architectural movement? We absolutely can do that. Is it a heritage asset that council would like to preserve, as opposed to, for example, allowing it to redevelop, daylighting a creek, creating a public plaza, and so on? So, I mean, ultimately, that will always be council's choice. I'm not sure that I personally see the benefit of a task force or the resourcing implications of that. Certainly encourage any heritage-minded folks to share their knowledge, to provide input, or to continue to provide their input, but ultimately it will be a council decision. Currently, not a single building within the village is officially designated as a heritage resource. There is nothing that is restricting council from that perspective. As mentioned, if someone wants to come forward and make the case, then obviously they'd be encouraged to do so, and council could consider heritage revitalisation agreements as a tool. You always have that available to you. That's not unique to the local area plan. That's part of your tools as a local government.
Yeah, and I do anticipate that happening, but it's just how we're going to prepare for that. The other thing is in your final slide on recommendations, you put in the word workshop with the planning committee and the ADBI and ADRA. On our written one, I don't see the word workshop, and I do kind of wonder a best practice of moving forward with this, given that there's been a lot of input, a lot of community engagement, and I do wonder if it would be great to get those groups in a room together for more of a discussion workshop with council, staff. Just a thought.
Staff would certainly be open-minded. Yes, sorry, I'm remiss in using words differently, or using different words rather. Certainly, I can clarify the intent anyway. We would very much like to get in a room with ADRA and ADBIA. I think that would be really productive from staff's perspective. So that's the intent, and I think workshop, small W, really, obviously it is a discussion, but I think it's a chance to roll up our sleeves, what works, what could be better, what could be added, etc., to the draft plan. So that's certainly the intent. In terms of council's participation, I think the only restrictions are really to do with the community charter. There can't be more than 4 of you anywhere at the same time, or you have quorum and it's a council meeting.
Yeah, I think my understanding is with workshops, as long as no decisions are being made, but that's not. But would you include the planning committee in with the other stakeholder groups?
To Councillor Gemelli, no, I would actually intentionally keep that separate, and for this reason, it's about acknowledging the function of that committee. Council expressly struck that committee. They are residents, but to provide independent, third-party professional expertise. That's why they're architects, landscape architects, industry folk, etc. They're not an engagement tool. We will be referring to them because they hold similar job titles, they have a depth of experience. We'll be looking for planning and design input versus for them seeking to represent residents or businesses. It's a different kind of thing, whereas when we meet with residents and businesses, that's exactly what we want to understand. Where they're at as residents, how this responds to their needs as businesses. The planning committee, really it's that third-party, neutral, independent advice. That's the terms of reference that council adopted. That's why that committee was formed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Snyder?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I don't have any questions for Mr. Hawkins. I just wanted to comment that I think that from where we started this process and the amount of public feedback that's come forward, clearly this most recent proposal reflects an acknowledgement of the request, the comments, the feedback that you've received. My only other comment is just that to encourage residents out there that want to continue this engagement process, that it's important that they step forward and continue on the process. It's not done yet. This is just a draft. And like you said, you're not seeking our endorsement here this evening. This is just to make put forward the draft and received for information. So, but very well done. Good report. So with that, I would certainly intend on supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Snyder. Councillor Watt?
Yeah, thank you. So I've got a few questions and comments. I'll try to keep it short. One thing I would have loved to see in these results, and I don't know if you can crunch those numbers, but so we see, sort of in the 50 to 55% of strong support, and then around 25% in most of the categories on less support. Is there any way of crunching the data to see how many people supported, what percentage supported the increased heights and densities? Because it sort of, it implies that in the one section, but is there a way to also get that data?
To Councillor Watt, so if I'm understanding, the breakdown of, for example, those that indicate somewhat support, the breakdown of how many wanted to see less height versus more height?
Yeah, and increased density and height versus none. So I'd love if there was a way to, at some point going forward, to get that data, if you can generate it from what's there.
Yes, staff can follow up with that, and as we move through the process, provide you with further information, yeah.
Okay, and, of course, I'm always I won't say anti-density, but I tend to really prefer to keep the character of Ambleside, and I really, the residents here, what we really like is that we are eclectic and unique. And then I've seen the term eclectic applied to areas where we're going up 6 to 8 stories. So I just truly hope we don't lose sight of who we are as a community in this process. And you made a comment about increasing parking, and the only way to do that, of course, is to redevelop. But then I look at that in the old adage, build it, they will come. So we'll increase parking, but will we not also, just also increase the number of vehicles requiring parking? And I don't think we're all going to be on buses and bikes, although it's a nice idea.
To Councillor Watt, no, I agree that I don't think we'll all be on buses and bikes, but thanks for the opportunity to clarify. For parking, when I talk about increasing parking, I'm talking about visitor and commercial parking, because what we've heard from the public is, not everyone obviously, but there was a concern that, I come here and I can't park, right? The streets are well used, etc. So the increase in parking will be for people who want to drive from Caulfield, whatever it might be, and actually visit Ambleside. So that's not going to increase vehicle use in the district. It's going to make it easier for drivers to park in Ambleside. So that's the intent of that statement. But what council could do, which I also mentioned, is not generate new drivers from new residents in Ambleside by actually lowering the residential requirement for parking, so that if you moved into a new building, there wasn't parking space for your unit, or there were fewer parking spaces.
But are we not talking more office and commercial in these plans? So would that not still create the need for more parking?
To Councillor Watt, we would expect actually this plan to be relatively net consistent in terms of commercial space. I think the focus really is on getting the right commercial uses in the right locations. So, for example, not deadening the street with certain commercial uses, and allowing for the regeneration of commercial spaces.
Okay, and as I see one of our local business owners in the audience here, it takes me to another question. In the process of, upzoning and densification in existing commercial areas, what are the unanticipated or unintended negative impacts on existing businesses as, let's say, we've got a place right now that's a 1.75 and we're going to be giving it a 3. How is that going to impact rents? Will some of that be downloaded as property assessments presumably will go up? So as we go through this process, what can we expect?
To Councillor Watt, so I think the first point is there's very few instances where we're suggesting going from the existing 175 to 3.
Yeah.
We're talking a couple of sites pretty much.
I was just using that as an example, just as we obviously increase the value of the property in the area.
And so then, understood, thank you. So then I think we're into the unknown in terms of we're not BC assessment. So obviously they could change assessed values. That's something which is just, I'm not being evasive, that's something that we don't control. But I think behind that, the larger point is council has 2 ways of doing this. One is spot zoning, also known as don't plan.
Yeah.
Don't have a plan, don't put FARs, don't put heights, don't control form and character, etc. And then obviously there can be no impact on property values because you're somewhat blindsided when there's an application. That's one approach. If we don't want to do that, and we've tried that, just being really candid and people don't like it, if we commit to seeing this plan through, then a potential consequence is that property values increase because we are signposting redevelopment potential. But that's an existential question for this council. But what I genuinely believe I've heard is people want to see a plan. They want to understand how different jigsaw pieces can fit together to create a great village.
Well, I understand that, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I just feel that every element, we should be cognizant of. And I had another question in here that's a little awkward, but so in here we're, how does it put it? Regarding engaging with and paying for Squamish staff for our local area plan, is the same being offered in reverse? So are we being invited to engage on their towers that they're planning to build down there? And what would be the process in reverse? Have we been approached for engagement?
To Councillor Watt, that's not to my knowledge, and I'll refer to Director Baker.
Yeah, thanks, David. I mean, and to my knowledge, not that I'm aware of either. We have not, as far as I'm aware, been invited to engage in that process on lands that aren't within our jurisdiction.
Is it something we should maybe propose that we do if we're not? As it impacts all of us. We're all in this together, Squamish Nation, us.
And
North Van.
Through the acting mayor, I understand that council may be meeting with their council, and that would be, I think, a great opportunity for you to bring that up in that forum.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cassidy.
So first of all, Mr. Hawkins, thank you very much for all your work. Very much appreciated. And I too agree with you that you need a plan in life. I'm definitely abhor spot zoning, as you well know. I also want to thank you for the Masonic Hall comment, where you commented upon the fact of the potential planning for community use, because as you recollect, there have been at least 2 proposals at that site which were defeated by the council of the day, of which I was a member, because there was no community use going to be allowed on that site. And as we all know, the history of the building is that the land was given by John Lawson to the Masons, and the Masons in turn were the ones who sold it. So technically speaking, Mr. Lawson wanted that for community use. So that's number one. And number two, I'm just very curious, the responses that you have received to your survey or such the like, were they basically from across the community, or were they concentrated in one specific area of the community, such as Ambleside and Dunderave?
Through the acting mayor, thank you for that question, Councillor Cassidy. We did actually seek through the survey, and these things are optional, anything demographic is always optional, but we did actually ask people if they lived in Ambleside, worked there, both, or et cetera. So in the engagement summary, 40% of respondents lived in Ambleside, 5% lived and worked there, and 2% worked there. And I'm summarizing, obviously. So, and the others were district residents. So, fairly evenly divided, which is something that I would not be surprised at. You know, for example, when we did a plan for Horseshoe Bay, it was very locally concentrated, whereas Ambleside does play this dual function. It is both a local neighbourhood and it is the district's centre. It's where we are today. It's where our main public facilities are. So I would say there was fairly evenly divided between West Van residents and local residents or local business owners, etc. Perhaps, if I could make a comment, that's perhaps another reason for the next steps that I'm recommending, to actually ensure we get that local business and local resident voice, because I certainly think we've heard broadly from the general West Vancouver public. So the workshop I'm describing would help ground the draft plan and any comments on within that more local perspective.
Okay, thank you. And further to Councillor Watt's point about us engaging with the Squamish Nation on this plan, then I do think quite seriously that it behooves us to begin a serious relationship with themselves as far as conversations go around their intention with their lands. Because if we really are talking about a quality of life on the North Shore, then what they do with their lands and what we do with our lands is going to impact each party. And hopefully we could have some semblance of a symbiotic relationship as we proceed with our development. That's my 2 cents on the subject, and I think it's my 2 cents are reasonably well shared in this community. Thank you.
Well, I think we've heard from all members of council now. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Lambert. We have two members of the public that have signed up. Maureen O'Brien from the Ambleside Dunderave Business Improvement Association, followed by Nigel Malkin from the Ambleside Dunderave Residents Association.
Welcome, Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Maureen O'Brien from the Ambleside Dunderave BIA, and I won't take up much time. I just wanted to thank David and staff for the excellent work they've done on this. They have met with the BIA several times. They have listened to what our feedback was and have taken it into consideration. We fully support what they put together so far and look forward to working with them with ADRA. I've spoken with David and we both agree, and we've met with ADRA and would like to meet as a whole. Because I think we can get a lot more done. When we did Imagine Ambleside, our board met with the ADRA board, and that was probably the most constructive time that we had, and where we got most of the feedback to keep moving forward with Imagine Ambleside. Speaking of Imagine Ambleside, from the survey we did, we had over 1,000 responses from that. Very much of it the same as what the district has collected, the same feedback about height, about through streets, about light, about their where farmers market should be. It's very much the same. So I fully support the work that they've done, and I look forward to continuing to work with them. So I encourage you all to support this tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Lambert and Council. My name's Nigel Malkin. I'm a director with the Ambleside Dunderave Residents Association. You may be aware that ADRA has been a named stakeholder involved in the process of creating the local area plan for Ambleside. ADRA would like to commend the work done by the planning team, led by David Hawkins. Many hours have been spent listening and deciphering information from our community. An atmosphere of working together has been established, creating a cooperative and combative approach to managing change. The latest document before Council is for information purposes and is a draft of potential changes to the commercial zone of Ambleside. Staff is asking for Council's direction to move it forward. At this juncture, ADRA would like to ask for Council's consideration on 3 main points before instructing staff for the next steps. Reconsider the OCP guidelines stating that the LAP Ambleside plan add 1,000 to 1,200 units to Ambleside. This could translate into 2,500 to 3,000 additional residents. Has the Council given direction to staff to consider the impact of these extra residents to our library, ice rink, senior centre, etc. for the future? Should these numbers be modified in view of Cypress Park project that was approved in November of 24 for additional 7,000 residents? Has the development on Squamish Nation land been factored into the overall formula for this densification? Remove the Hollyburn Corner from the Ambleside commercial area discussions to allow for proper dialogue around the Hollyburn Corner, which would include the future redevelopment plans for the recreational centre property, the gas station and St. Stephen's Church. This is a relatively new commercial residential area, requires detailed and thorough examination on its own. ADRA has viewed, throwing things apart, the town centre to be located between 13th and 19th Street. Consideration be given to the 1800 block of Marine and returning it to a commercial zone and not an apartment zone. The 1800 block is home to a number of smaller businesses and restaurants which should not be isolated from the rest of the Ambleside commercial area. Memorial Park on the northwest corner of 19th and the apartment on the southwest corner makes a common sense ending for the Ambleside village. I thank you very much for the opportunity to respectfully express our views as we go through the process. ADRA is committed to working with David Hawkins' team and of course the ADBIA with Maureen O'Brien, and look forward to the day when we can endorse the future vision of the Ambleside commercial area. Respectfully submitted by the Ambleside Dunderave Residents Association, and I thank you very much for your time. David, very nice work so far. Impressive.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malkin. So now I think we're at the point where we can move the series of recommendations. Councillor Gambioli.
Sure, I'll do that. So I will recommend that the Ambleside Local Area Plan Commercial Areas Engagement Summary, attached as Appendix A to the December 20th, 2024 report from the Senior Manager of Community Planning and Sustainability, be received for information.
Seconded by. Yeah. Call the question. All in favor? Next recommendation.
And I will recommend that the Ambleside Commercial Areas Draft Plan, attached as Appendix B to the December 20th, 2024 report from the Senior Manager of Community Planning and Sustainability, be published for community input, be used for stakeholder engagement with the ADBIA and ADRA, and be referred to the Planning Committee for its recommendations.
Second.
Call the question. All in favor? And
finally, recommend that staff report back in the second quarter of 2025 with a proposed local area plan for the commercial areas for Council's consideration.
Second.
Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. I think we can call the mayor back now. I need to assume that. Oh, excuse me. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just wanted to.
Thank you, Councillor Lambert.
Are you okay?
Oh, yeah. I just want to say it was really good to hear from the BIA and ADRA. I appreciate you coming up and making your comments public.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Lambert. If we could now move to, we have no bylaws, new business, consent agenda item. Could I ask Councillor Cassidy, please?
Okay, recommend that the consented items as follows be approved. And should I just go basically as written? Would you like
Just
that?
as written, I think.
As written.
Thank you. And Councillor Thompson? Discussion, question, all in favor? Contrary, carried. And tonight, we're going to just jump to the public question and comment section. Does any member of public wish to? I think Ms. O'Brien has a comment.
Just something that, hi, it's me again. Something that the BIA has worked on for 4 years. I've contacted 3 different businesses and finally have one. We're having a cheese shop finally.
Now, this is worthy of front page of the newspaper.
Charcuterie and cheese and wine, where you can sit outside, have a glass of wine and a little charcuterie. There'll be cheeses from over 100 different types of cheeses to choose from. So we're super excited about it. They'll probably open, depending on permits and how long that takes, summertime. So,
Where?
On Bellevue.
Where?
They need tasters, yes. In the space that houses.
It's where the Darwin display
So
suite
they'll have
was.
nice outdoor space as well. And super excited about it. So that is big for us. That was the #1 thing people wanted to see on Imagine Ambleside. So glad to get that done. And next up is a hotel.
Yes?
Cheese. So
Thank you so
Just
much.
wanted to share
Thanks for all your good work for the business community. And could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Thompson. Seconded by Councillor Lambert. Question, all in favor? Contrary, carried. Thanks very much. Okay, let's go, gang. We've got staff waiting.
that's it.